It's connecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are live. Hello, good evening, folks. Welcome to Tashkil. Tashkil is a design talk series by the IITG alumni. Tashkil, the word Tashkil is an Arabic word which means to shape. So, with the help of this talk series, we hope you can shape your career into the right direction. So, we all are here to listen to Manu speak. So, Manu, the stage is all yours. Good luck.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Newman, and hello, everyone. Let me just set up my screen share so that we are started. I hope the screen is visible. Um, yeah, cool. Good evening. Thank you for joining. I'm assuming after a days of work for folks joining in from India, really appreciate taking time in the evening. My name is Manu. I'm a senior designer with Atlassian, an alumni of IIT Guwahati, which is why I'm perhaps here. And today I'm going to speak or kind of touch upon a topic very close to my heart, which is designing portfolios, and hopefully be able to share some practical tips and hacks to go about it. To begin with, I do have a couple of disclaimers. The first one is, even though the content of this is kind of designed for students, like keeping in mind students, but I've also kept it slightly generic so that it's relevant for folks who have few set of years of experience in the industry. So don't worry if you're not a student and a part of the session, you'll still find something valuable out of this. The second one is that it's not just for UI UX design, which is what people assume or consider a portfolio of. This is applicable to actually any stream of design. So we'll speak a little general about all streams and then go specific into examples catering to UI UX. Um, of course, it's hard that this is happening remote. I wish we could all be in a room and have like a more informal conversation. Speaking over a Zoom or AirMeet is almost like speaking to a wall. I can only see thumbnails around, but we can keep this interactive. Let's keep the questions coming in on the chat. I have my eyes on it. I'd love to take questions on the fly as well. Like if you're on a particular topic, we can start discussing about it there and then. And of course, we'll have time in the end for questions. So yeah, keep the chat running. That's my ask. In terms of the agenda for today, I want to start with talking about an approach mindset, which is how you want to perceive or think about a portfolio when you start. Of course, then I'll dive a little deep into some practical hacks around this, like things that you actually can do to make your portfolio stand out. And then we kind of want to close it with future proofing, how portfolio is not like a one-time process. You have to kind of think long term. And of course, there's a good section of Q&A in the end. But like I said, keep the questions coming. I love to take questions while I'm on a particular topic so that the context is retained and we can chat more about it. Cool. So let's begin with the approach mindset. When you think of a design portfolio, I think it's a known factor that it's considered a tough thing. Like it's additional work, it's extra work. You need to take time outside of your student life, of your professional life to work and create it. And it's a known thing that to create a portfolio that's robust and that's really appreciated is in itself like a full-time job. So that's the kind of the big setting the context in the beginning. Like we all know how hard or how tricky creating a portfolio can be. But I have a slight spicy take. It's not that spicy, it's a mildly spicy take on this. Based on my experience in both creating portfolios and reviewing portfolios over the years. And my take is that a design portfolio is actually a known solution. It's something we know that exists to a not so known problem space. It might be obvious to a few of you, which is great, but the problem space is what I want to dig a little deep in terms of the approach mindset when you're thinking of a portfolio. So we know what a portfolio is a known solution for, right? Like the first and foremost, it's a proof of work. It's something that showcases your craft. It shows how you think. It tells, I mean, you share it with others to kind of get feedback on your work. So it's a proof of work. That's what we know it is. And for a lot of you, it's also a personal brand. It's a way you want others to perceive you. It's about self-expression. It's about your side projects, your side hustles. It's something that tells your personal story, right? So a proof of work and a personal brand is one of the outcomes of a portfolio, right? That's what you create it for. But what is it that you're creating it for as a problem? Like what is the problem that a portfolio is trying to solve? And if you try to break it down in your conventional design thinking way in terms of users needs and pain points, you start to discover that a portfolio can have different kinds of users as the audience that is consuming it. Say, for example, a recruiter or an HR who is scanning through your portfolio to send forward to another design manager. They are also consuming your portfolio, and so is say a designer or researcher who is kind of trying to get an assessment of your craft through looking at it. Both of these people have different needs, different ways of assessing your portfolio, different maybe time that they can afford to give to scan your portfolio. Perhaps even you yourself, like you might be a consumer of your portfolio as a place where you document your journey as a designer, right? Like, so it could almost be like your personal journal. I see a lot of designers do think of their portfolio as a way to document their work, which is also fine. But end of the day, there are these different users who are consuming your portfolio, and you need to start thinking in terms of each of them and what their pain points, needs are. I'll speak a little about pain points that at least the recruiters or hiring managers generally have with with portfolios. The first, of course, is the scarcity of time. Like you'd imagine someone who's evaluating your portfolio to at least spend 10 minutes on it, but the harsh reality is that 10 minutes is super expensive. And that ties into the problem of scale, right? Like for an example, here in Atlassian, when we do campus hiring, we receive about, I think this year we received about close to 200 applicants from different universities. And from 200 applicants to go to, say, a shortlist of 25 to 30 students, and then to eventually hire, say, one or two students, you can imagine the time taken to assess a portfolio to keep shrinking as and when the scale grows, right? So the harsh reality is we perhaps spend at max 5 to 7 minutes per portfolio, at least in the initial shortlisting phase, as a recruiter, and spend more time in detail when you're actually interviewing and speaking to the candidates in a one-on-one conversation. So it's those 5 minutes that you have to form an impression or to give that proof of work to whoever is assessing your portfolio. And those 5 minutes are the ones that you perhaps need to design your portfolio around. I'll come to certain hacks around time management when it comes to portfolio in the later half of the session. But in terms of what recruiters or hiring managers look for in those 5 minutes, I like to think of them as just signals. And you'll be surprised to know that specifically in students or someone who's starting out their UX careers, the signals are not really about the designs themselves. Like, we know that you're just starting out and your designs would, even though, I mean, I'm not saying we'd look for bad designs, but designs is not the final designs that you have created is perhaps not the only thing that is expected to be stand out in your portfolio. So things like how eager you are to learn, your passion for the craft, your storytelling skills, how you approach problems, that's even more important than your actual designs, your actual UIs, your actual empathy maps, and all the different things we put in your portfolios. So I have a quote here by someone I really admire in this space, Jared. And I'll share a tweet thread later on as well, where he's spoken about what hiring managers look for when you're hiring fresh grads. So he says that what's preventing you as a grad or as a student from getting that internship job or that gig is that hiring managers can't see your vector of growth. So it's more about how you're learning and not how you work today. And think of it as almost like an insight that if you dig deep into the problem space of portfolios and hiring, you'll uncover that no one is really looking at how polished your final UI is. Of course, that's one of the factors, but that's not the deciding factor. The factor is how open you are to learning as a student, how open you are to sharing your journey with us, you're sharing your mistakes with us. So the way I break this learning aspect down is threefold. The first is, of course, students talking about how they've learned and grown in the design journey, and that's the biggest part of the story itself. Like more than the domain stuff that we talk about or the process stuff we talk about, it's more about what you didn't know and what you uncovered and you navigated through. The second and the biggest part for me is how open you are to share your learnings and your mistakes on the way. I definitely think mistakes are a big turn on when it comes to recruiters and hiring managers. We love to see candidates being very open about mistakes they've perhaps done or things they've learned on the way, and how they course corrected themselves. That's expected in a student's journey as a designer. And the vector of growth that Jared spoke about is more about show us from your first year to your fourth year, or perhaps in your 2 years of design education, how far have you come, and what direction has your education or even experience? I know a lot of or a majority of students actually are not pursuing design education, but are learning design on the side through different sources or materials. Even for them, like from the day you started to the day you are creating your portfolio, what's that journey been? Have you grown from your first college fest poster that you perhaps created to your shiny app designs that you're putting on your portfolio? Is that a growth that you yourself see and realize is something that portfolio should kind of signal to the hiring managers? So essentially what I'm trying to say is the approach mindset is that designing a portfolio is a full-fledged design project. It's the problem space within this project that we need to kind of not overlook. I know the solution space is more well known, like the different ways you can create a portfolio, different platforms you can host, different things you can do. All that is great, but it's you need to start thinking about who are you creating this for? What are their problems? How are they going to consume it? Are they going to maybe browse through it while sitting in a cab or a plane? So is that the 5 minutes that they will perhaps have a look at your portfolio? And by the way, that is a valid use case. Like at least in a pre-COVID time when I mean full-time employees are traveling a lot, they do portfolio assessments on the fly sitting at airports. In cabs. So you might think that it's an edge case, but you'll be surprised to know that it's not. And the more you start thinking of this as a design project in itself, and you start thinking of your problems, your users, the easier it'll become for you, because that's the one skill that you all are good at, right? Like that's your key USP anyways. So it's basically just reapplying that to the portfolio creation process. So with that approach mindset in mind, of thinking of creating your portfolio as a design problem, as a design process in itself, the few hacks that I have to share or talk about today, I have 5 hacks. I didn't start with the number 5, I just ended up with it in the end, and I'll straight get into them. A few of these hacks you might find fairly obvious, which is great, again, which is a good sign, which means you're aware about these things. But the perspective from which I'm sharing them is that these are some of the more common signals through which we are able to distinguish between good portfolios and great portfolios, right? So as a recruiter, these are common signals that at least I have observed in the past few years when I go through portfolios of people who apply to my company or people who ask for feedback, and it's easy to identify some of these things to distinguish between good and great portfolios. So the first one, it's a very simple one, is about being very intentional about the journey you want your audience to take. The audience is, of course, again, the people you expect would be consuming your portfolio. It doesn't always need to be a hiring manager or like someone in a corporate. It can be like for freelancers, it can be new clients. For someone who's kind of more into personal branding, it can be like even more generic. So you need to think of who is the target audience for your portfolio and what is the journey you want them to take. Now, when I talk about intentional journey, the first and the most obvious thing which you'll be surprised to know a lot of portfolios struggle with is the sequence of projects. More than often, it's the expectation as someone who is looking at the portfolio is that the first couple of projects are the one you want us to have a look at, right? Like you perhaps don't have the time to go beyond 2 or 3 projects. So we assume that the signal the student is sending, or the student or the applicant is sending, is that the first 2 are the ones you want us to look at. But I see a lot of portfolios where not a lot of thought has been given into the sequence of projects itself, where you might have like a 1-week exploratory project as your first thing, but maybe a nice, more detailed 3-month case study sitting somewhere down in the long list of work that we have done. So simple as that, like put your best work on the top, keep them as the first 2 things that you want your audience to consume. And while they're consuming that, the information hierarchy within those case studies is something that is in your control. We spoke about time being a constraint for the hiring managers and recruiters, right? So if to solve that problem, an obvious solution, which as a designer you would expect, is to play around with the information hierarchy of your case study or your portfolio, right? So you want to highlight key points, and if someone is interested, they can kind of go into the details if needed. I'll dig a little deep into this point a little later when I actually give examples of how you can play around with information hierarchy. But think about that as intentional. Like you want some things to be definitely noticed by someone who's going through your portfolio. It's okay if they don't read through the paragraphs or if they don't open that link, that is fine. But if there's something you feel someone should really read, highlight it, like keep it on the top, pop it up, add flashy colors, I don't know, do something, but ensure at your end that you are signaling that this is important for you. And the third, and of course, we spoke about it a while back, the time to consume content. It's in my head, it's almost like a metric to gauge the success of your portfolio, right? So if say your portfolio is your final solution to a project, and you were to usability test your portfolio, take it to someone who's not seen it before at all, like maybe a non-designer friend, a time, say 5 to 7 minutes, and see what all they consume within that. You'll be surprised to know that people maybe are struggling just to navigate across your homepage and your case studies in those 5 minutes. Or maybe it's the time that takes the portfolio to load is itself like 30 seconds or 45 seconds, just because those high resolution images is making it hard for the page to load. So be very cautious about the amount of information that is consumable in a short span of time. Assume the worst, and the worst here is 5 minutes or even less than that. Assume that no one is going to spend more time than that, and see for yourself how much information can be consumed within those 5 minutes. So yeah, that's the first hack. Being very intentional about the journey you want your audience to take. It's something that's totally in your control as someone who's designing that portfolio, and you can hack your way around it through the sequence, through playing with the hierarchy of information, and being mindful of the time it takes to read through the content. Any questions so far? I realize I've been just talking for 20 minutes and the chat's been fairly quiet. I hope I'm audible. Else I should have received a call that something's wrong. But cool. I see some thumbs up. But yeah, keep the questions coming in. I'll I'll move to the next hack. But if you have even if you don't have questions and you have comments or experience around having seen this or having some example to share, please feel free to drop it in the chat. It'll be lovely to even for me to hear someone else's perspective on the same topic. Cool. So hack number 2 is a favorite one, and this is coming from the fact that I know as a student we really love design methods and design processes. It's almost like it's ingrained that process is the god of design, and it's what makes good design stand out. Partially agree. Design methods are great, but only great if you really understand why you're using them. So I'll dig deep into this in the sense that when you're using a particular method in your portfolio or case study, you yourself need to be very confident about why you're using it, and that's evident when you start forming those connections between the steps that you're showing and your final outcome. A very classical example of this and a very debatable one in the design community is that of a persona. I think we all like creating those persona templates and showing them and saying that this is a way to kind of create empathy for users. But when we ask candidates that how did the persona actually really help you uncover something about the user that you didn't know previously, candidates fall short. So for everything that you're putting on the persona, on the portfolio, whether it's an empathy map, whether it's a SWOT analysis, whether it's a information architecture is one of the favorites. I feel like we don't really know why we put it, but we still put it because it looks nice as a diagram. All of these are signals that are going against you. So the way to counter this is to highlight the connections. Like if you're going into a user research section on your portfolio, talk about why you need to do that research. Like what is it that you don't know about your users and customers that made you think that, okay, we should do this research. Maybe you don't need that research. Maybe you just need to do some usability testing at the end. That's also totally fine. Not all methods need to be used in all the projects, right? So be very cautious or be very selective about what you're using and know the why of using that particular method. And of course, this ties into the fact that you don't really need to enforce the process. Ironically, most portfolios and case studies are in a like a linear vertical scroll fashion. Like that's just how web is designed as of today. But that's not how a design process really is, right? Like let's be honest, designs is never supposed to be linear. Like we don't get the right solution in the first go. We make mistakes. We miss out some edge cases. We uncover them when we are testing. We go back. We change. Our problem statements change on the way. It's a messy process, but very few portfolios show that messy process. Portfolios come across as very perfect. Like we did all the research. We spoke to 30 people. Here are the insights. Here's the pixel perfect designs. That's just signaling that this is not really true. And even more so as a student, when you're just starting out, it's expected to be even more messier, right? Like you're expected to miss out on some things and you're expected to make mistakes. It's rare that we speak about these mistakes. So that's a hack. Don't skip talking about all of that. Talk about your learnings on the way. Talk about why this particular design method actually didn't work for you. That's a great thing to put on your portfolio, that you did the SWOT analysis, but nothing came out of it. Great learning. Now, because of that, you perhaps chose to do something else. And you did user research, but perhaps the insights that came were very obvious. So it didn't really help you. So hence you perhaps did something else. Speak about such things. You don't need to really do every particular process or method that's taught to you in school or that you read about. Be selective about what you need for your project or your context, right? That's the point. And again, the hack is around being very cautious about design methods. Cautious in the sense, I'm not discouraging you from using them. They are, of course, the design superpower that's there for you to build your empathy and all of that. But be confident about why you're using them. Like you yourself should be convinced that it's actually helping you. And if it's not, that's also fine. Talk about it. Like tell us about why this particular design method didn't work for you. Um, I can take a few questions at this point. I will share the slides at the end of the talk with everyone, so you will have access to that. The session will be recorded. Should I risk to build portfolio and look for jobs, or get placed, then build portfolio and switch? I think I'm currently in my third year. Should I risk to build portfolio and look for jobs, or get placed and then build portfolio and switch? I think as an engineering student, if you are passionate about design or are pursuing design as a side thing and you want to get into an industry, there's never a wrong time to build a portfolio. Like I'll come to this in the end, but I do think design is like a portfolio is like a lifelong process. So you always can come. I mean, there's never a wrong time to start making one. So I think that risk of building a portfolio is always worth it, especially as a student. If not a job, it will lead you to more opportunities, and it will lead you to become a better designer, because building a portfolio is a project in itself. So it is almost like a way for you to practice your design skills, right? So I think that risk is worth it. I think there are questions in the questions tab as well. Why most of the companies look at UI, Behance, Medium? Okay, cool. I think I have a few sections covering a few of these, so I will come back to these maybe in a bit. Let me perhaps complete the hack section and then come back to the questions. Few of these should be answered in some of the things that I'm talking about next. Cool. Okay, so hack number 3. I think I lost my slide control. Cool. Group projects, very common, expected in student portfolios. I mean, we know that when you're starting out, you will work as a group. That's perhaps the nature of some design courses as well. But think from a recruiter and a hiring manager perspective, it's super hard to assess you on. You will be surprised to know that if two candidates apply and they both have the same group project, more than often we basically just skip that project and move to the next project, purely because we don't know your individual contribution to that group project if you've kind of shown it as it is. So it's really hard for someone who's consuming a group project to assess the individual's contribution in that specific piece of work, unless you have been very smart about it. So my hack for that is being smart about your group projects. I have 3 hacks. The first one is, as a student, you can start or thinking of planning your portfolio a bit, like especially for students who are in a 4-year course or a 2-year course. Start thinking in your 3rd year, what kind of a portfolio do you want by the end of your final year? Do you want a mix of internships, a mix of your thesis project, exploratory projects? How many of these would be individual projects? How many of these would be group projects, right? So if you start thinking from that perspective, you would end up maybe taking part in competitions, design competitions, or hackathons, to kind of uplift your portfolio to have more of your individual work, instead of having 4-member group work and the same work across multiple profiles, right? So start thinking of your portfolio early on. Like, I'm not saying build your career around your portfolio, like that shouldn't be the case, but it's something that you shouldn't totally ignore as well. Like you need to have it at the back of your mind when you're trying to think, okay, what project should I be taking up this semester, or what kind of thesis project should I be doing? Even more valuable, and this is, I feel this is more applicable to professionals working in the industry than students. Even in the industry, we pair up on projects, and we have like a team that works on problems, and not just like an individual designer. But we more than often forget to highlight our individual contribution, right? Like we don't mention how many people were part of this, or who was responsible for what was the duration for which this lasted. All of these are important information that the person who's looking at your portfolio is looking for. Like if we need to really dig deep to find this, it's a weak signal. If you are putting it up front that, hey, this is a group project, I was just responsible for this user research part of things. You can read more if you want, but I'm going to talk more about the user research. It's sending a clear signal to the recruiter that here's the part that this person has contributed. Also, it's sending a signal that this person has worked in a team, so is a team player. He or she knows how to collaborate, how to communicate. That's a signal as well, right? So working in a group is not looked down upon. It's a great a signal to send across of teamwork, of communication. But highlighting your contribution in that group is also something that's something in your control and you can hack. The third one is my favorite one, and I wish more people would do it. Is even though you may be a part of a project in a group, and 3 or 4 of you might be a part of the same project, you can narrate the story of that project in your individual portfolios differently, right? Like, so your portfolio doesn't need to be the same. Your project in your portfolio doesn't need to be the exact same thing as in your friend's portfolio or your group portfolio. You can narrate the story from your perspective. You can tell what you learned, and that person can tell what they learned. That's bringing that individuality or that your personal flavor to a group project, and that's something that can even make your group projects shine on your personal portfolios. Cool. I'll move to hack number 4. Keep the questions coming. I do want to wrap up the content so that we can jump into Q&A sooner. I think I'm slightly behind time, so I'll push through the content a bit. The fourth hack is again, unfortunately, a little student centric. It's one of the easiest or signals to distinguish good portfolios and great portfolios, purely because as students, user research is something that most of us get wrong, right? We tend to think that if you've spoken to your customer, if you've spoken to your users, you've built empathy, and that's user research. Unfortunately, that really is sending a weak signal. When you are talking about user research in your portfolios, talk about the process, talk about how scientific you were when you framed your questions. What was it that you didn't know because of which you did the research? How many people did you speak to? What did you do to remove biases in your conversations with your users? Maybe this is not about initial research. Maybe you're doing some usability testing. Tell us the process, like how many people, what were the tasks that you gave them? How did you frame those tasks? What were the questions you asked? That is more important. More than often, I've seen in portfolios, we just stick user quotations, user quotes, like my user said this, my user said that, and that's almost thought of as the conclusion of a user research. But that's just the first level of things, right? Like user research is going into multiple levels, going deep, keep asking the why question, which brings me to insight creation, which is from what the user has said to an actionable insight is a hard and arduous journey. Bring that out in your portfolio. Like show us that even though your users are saying something, if you think deeply and if you look at the data or analyze that further, the actual need is something else. Like that is the true beauty of user research that needs to shine in your portfolio. And a hack. I mean, this is almost like a jugaad hack to do this, but I encourage a lot of students to do this. Is when you're choosing your projects, choose it in a domain that's totally new to you. Like instead of solving problems for college students or parents or domains that you're familiar with, where it's easy for you to bring in your personal biases to your understanding of the users. Pick domains that you have no idea at all about. So in a way, you're forced to do all of this. You're forced to actually go and understand the users, understand their problems, understand uncover information that you perhaps already don't have. So it's, I mean, I'm not saying it's the best hack. It's one of the ways to do it, which I mean, it subconsciously avoids that personal biases that you may be carrying when you say solving problems that are more closer to you. So yeah, that's the fourth hack about user research. The fifth one and the last one is storytelling. No surprises. My perspective on storytelling is that when you're documenting your design work, that's just purely documenting in terms of the linear steps that you took as a part of your project, right? But if you add the flavor of your narrative or story to it, is when that becomes a portfolio. And there's an asterisk on this slide for a reason. I'll come back to it at the end of the talk. But for now, let's take that the flavor of storytelling is what makes your documentation into a portfolio. And by that flavor, I mean how you are setting your problems, how you're showing your journeys from one particular iteration of a design to another, whether you are, like I mentioned in the beginning, highlight your connections or the information hierarchy. Are you zooming in on the design decisions that you have taken on the way? Maybe these are mistakes, maybe these are learnings, maybe these are hypothetical scenarios that, okay, if I had more time, I would have perhaps done something else. If this was shipped, like most of the stuff that we build as students perhaps is not shipped, right? So if this was shipped, what would you have done? Speak about that. That is telling your flavor of things. That's something that you perhaps would have talked about in the project, but you perhaps don't have an artifact for that in your portfolio. And again, the more obvious one is the debate between should your portfolio be visual or should it be verbose? By verbose, I mean, should you use more text? Should you be more descriptive in nature? I feel striking that balance is totally in your hands. For someone who is curious to read more, having that information is handy, but it doesn't need to be there up front. Maybe it's hidden in a drop down. Maybe it's there on an expand. From a visual perspective, I always encourage you to create more assets for your case studies or portfolio. I think it's almost like a taken for granted thing in today's time. But still, I'm saying that if you feel that helps you narrate your story better, it's working for you. It's helping you, right? So don't shy away from creating additional assets if you feel that helps telling your story better. So 5 hacks: intentional journey, whys of design methods, be smart about your group projects, be smart about user research. It's not the same as talking to your users. And storytelling, that's a known thing. There are a few talking points. I saw a few questions around this about the platform you want to host your portfolio on. As a recruiter, I don't think hosting on a personal website versus Behance gives a very strong edge over the other. When you're creating your own personal website, you're adding another design project, right? Like now the design of the website and how well it works is also something that you need to take care of. And if you're able to pull that off well, definitely that's sending a strong signal that is working in your advantage. So if you're able to pull that off, great. I would definitely encourage that. But the problem is I see a lot of design portfolios hosted on personal websites where the website design is itself average or not done well. So you wouldn't realize it, but that's subconsciously sending a weak signal. Like say, for example, the layouts are all over the place on mobile, or maybe it's taking forever to load. Color combinations are off the way. So these are signals that you don't want to send because the intention of creating a personal website is to it's almost like another validation, right? Like you are good at your craft, and the website also is an example of it. So if you are good at that, please do it. It's definitely a strong signal. But if you're not so confident about it, it's not that big a loss. Like Behance portfolios or Notion or whatever the templates that are out there, even they work well as long as the focus stays on your craft, stays on your work. It's okay if it's on like a hosting platform. The second one is the portfolio website that we create is meant for someone to consume at their own convenience, right? Like you send the link and you expect that person to consume it at their own convenience. But say once you're shortlisted and you're actually doing some interviews with organizations, you are then presenting that portfolio. So both these scenarios are different scenarios. Like if you are essentially just rewalking through the website that you've already shared, you're sending a weak signal, because the one who's actually listening to you in that presentation has already seen it. And when you're presenting in person, you have the advantage of bringing your voice, bringing your face, bringing your emotions to that narration, to that story, right? Use that, and if maybe create a separate deck for it. Maybe create maybe don't go through the website at all. Just go through some of the videos. Show your journey through pictures. It's up to you. The point I'm trying to make is treat both of these scenarios as separate scenarios, and leverage the opportunities you have in both these scenarios to your benefit. And the third and the last one is, as a student, you have a lot of liberty. All the constraints in your projects are mostly in your control. Perhaps maybe the time is not because of whatever constraints, but in terms of domain, in terms of implementation, everything is in your control, which is where, as a recruiter, the expectation is you would get the freedom to go crazy, right? Like you should have some crazy ideas. You should experiment with new mediums, new domains, and you should not always just think of, okay, here's the problem, here's the app that solves this problem, or here's the website that really fixes this customer problem. So make use of this liberty, fail in that process, and it'll help you grow yourself in that journey. Yeah, I think I saw a few questions around some examples around these hacks. I've intentionally not gone into specific details for the time limit that I'm playing with. But I do have some resources that I'll be sharing at the end of the session, to some public known websites that you can browse through, to some of my friends have curated some portfolios that they individually really like, or case studies. I'll share some of these links in the chat at the end of the session that you can kind of look towards for inspiration. But the word of caution, and trust me with a pinch of salt, when you're looking for inspiration for a portfolio as a designer, there's a thin line between inspiration and plagiarism. You don't want to be Joey in this case. You want to be aware of your biases. And I'll tell you a story around this. When I was a student, I remember one of my seniors had done a portfolio workshop in college, and he had shown his resume to us as a part of that session. And his resume had like these rectangular blocks, color coded or something around that to demarcate different sections. Within a month of that session, I think our entire batch had to submit our resumes for some internship opportunity. And then I think more than 50% of our batch had the same resume. And we spoke to the recruiter later on, and even without us bringing that topic, he said that, how come everyone has the same resume? Where is this coming from? And people wouldn't even realize it, but all the patterns and common templates in resumes, portfolios are well known to someone who's looking at portfolios every day in and day out, right? Like we go through resumes and portfolios on a weekly basis, and we are going through not just your portfolio, but maybe portfolio of your entire batch. So if you're just picking up stuff, it will send a weak signal. So be aware of it, avoid it if possible. Cool. One last thing, speaking of the hacks, and this is a slightly spicy take, which is the spicy take number 2. I feel personal branding is one of those things that's slightly misunderstood, even more so in students. It's definitely overhyped for sure. That's my personal spicy take on it. But my recommendation is that as a student, you shouldn't go overboard with your personal branding, right? Like you already have a branding of a student, of someone who's learning, of someone who's who's in early years and is trying to get an understanding of how things work, don't break that brand, at least through your personal brand. And unless you're, of course, if you're applying for a specific brand position, if that's your role, that's totally fine. But especially from a UX perspective, don't let that overshadow your work. Like, your work is the one that should shine. So that's my suggestion. Stay true to yourself, own your strengths, and share your shining moments. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that your portfolio shouldn't reflect your personalities, your individuality. They should. They need to talk about you, but you don't need to explicitly spend effort in creating this perception that people should have about you of being a specific person, right? Especially as a student. If you want to maybe start a career as a freelancer, perhaps, or maybe you need a personal brand more than you do as a student, right? But for a student, it's not the thing that will help you get that job or not. Cool. I know I'm over time by, I think, 10 minutes, but I'll wrap this up in 3 minutes and then jump straight into questions. The last section is more just about revisiting some of the learnings that I've shared. I know I've spoken too many things, but you of course have the deck to go back to and the talk also to refer back to again. We started with talking about how designing a portfolio is tough. It's a full-time project. It's a full-time job. And I feel you. I totally agree that it's okay to feel overwhelmed when it comes to portfolios. And this is applicable not just for students. This is applicable for people who have tons of experience in the industry. I feel it day in and day out. I'm bad at creating portfolios myself. I feel so I overthink when it comes to designing my portfolio. And you're not the only one. It's okay. And that's my first suggestion to future-proof your portfolio, right? The first thing is you have to embrace it. Like, you need to realize that it's going to stay. It's not going to end after your college. It's not going to end after that first job. It's a lifelong design project that you perhaps didn't know you signed up for, but you need to embrace it and you need to enjoy it. And once you get into that zone, it'll become a much easier journey for you. Of course, I started by talking about that. It's not just the solution, it's the problem space that you need to keep in mind. So think about the needs and the pain points of the people who will be consuming your portfolio. And the last and the most important one, that's we forget to leverage the privilege that we have in today's time, right? Like, so share around your portfolio, get feedback, make changes. You learn on the go. You won't crack your portfolio in the first go. You will make mistakes, but it shouldn't be a reason for you to not change it, to reiterate, to get feedback. For students in design colleges, go to your professors, like set up sessions with them to review your portfolios. Talk to your peers, to your batchmates, to your seniors, to your alumni. For folks who are not in design colleges, you have so much opportunities to get feedback on your portfolios. There's so many designers who are now opened up like coffee hours for you to schedule time and get feedback. There's so much content on YouTube. Most of the stuff that I've spoken about today is something that you're probably already aware of. Like, it's no longer a secret sauce, right? Like, it's out there in the public domain. Use Twitter, use Discord, maybe set up a Clubhouse room to talk about portfolios. It's a privilege, and use that to your benefit. Like, you're not alone in this. Of course, you don't need to. Maybe you can use Bumble as well. No problems. But use these platforms to work in your favor. I spoke about a hack around design documentation becoming your portfolio as a part of by adding storytelling. I want to end by saying that's not necessarily true. Like, if you start getting a hang of building your portfolio and make the storytelling part a natural aspect to the way you document, eventually your design documentation will become your portfolio. And that's what happens when you join the industry as well, right? Like, on a constant basis, you are talking and presenting about your work to your peers, to your engineers, to the CEO of the company. So you are telling stories about your work on a daily basis, and that is through your design documentation, how you are creating your work, you're documenting, and that is eventually what becomes your portfolio. So if the good news is, if you don't really need to separately think of documentation and story and portfolio in the long run, as long as you're able to bring storytelling as a part of your natural documentation process. So if you start thinking in terms of the story, even in your documentation, it will become the one and the same thing. I want to end with the thought we started with. Like we said that it's a known solution to a not so known problem space. I hope by the 50 minutes that I had, I know it's more than what I signed up, but you would start feeling that it's not really an unknown problem space. It's a familiar one. And the takeaway is that as a student specifically, the expectation is that you should be like SpongeBob. Like you're supposed to be absorbing as much information and knowledge and all these new things that you're learning and making the sense of this ambiguity. And you're not really expected to be an imposter. Like, it's easy to figure out who's an imposter in the portfolio because it comes out that you're not being true to yourself. So be a SpongeBob. Don't be an imposter. And that's me at the end of the session. I will take up some questions now. I know I have 8 minutes. So in case I'm not able to answer all the questions in this session, you can reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn. My handle is usually the same everywhere. It's just my full name. I'm happy to take more questions there. But let me start with a few questions now. Cool. I'll just go in chronological order. With the first one, can you touch upon the approach you follow for design documentation in terms of tracking smaller yet key nuances such as stakeholder decisions, iterations, constraints? That's a great one. I wish I had more time to speak about it, but in a nutshell, I think a hack for this is to create templates for things like stakeholder decisions or say design iterations. In Atlassian, we have like a commonly created templates where we do the hard work once, that every time we need to create a design decision, we'll just use this template, get the people in a room, document it in the room itself and come out of it. So I think once you start going through projects, you'll realize that there's commonality in terms of these different types of documents that you need, like decision documents, or your design spec documents, or maybe your user research reports, and then there's like a bigger document that just ties all of these together in a narrative or a story. So I think the hack is to identify what can be reused and then start creating a template out of it. Does it add to your chances of landing an experienced designer job after a design degree? Spicy take, no. A degree is not a proof of work. It's your portfolio that's a proof of work. Companies don't. I mean, I know when we are hiring for a more experienced roles, we really we don't actually have any shortlisting criteria based on your past education or your past degrees. It's purely the work that you share with us, which is used as a way to assess whether you're a good fit or not. So in short, a degree is not really a proof of work. So it's not, I mean, a deciding factor. The way it adds your chances, again, being brutally honest, is sometimes some organizations find it easier to recruit purely from campuses. It helps them save time and solves that scale problem. But the good news is all of that is also changing. Like instead of just visiting same couple of campuses every year, companies are now shifting to. Anyways, we have moved to remote hiring, so we are hiring. I mean, sitting at the comfort of a home. So instead of just recruiting from a specific campuses, companies are moving to opening up their, even for fresh designers, opening up the positions to people from all sorts of backgrounds. So yeah, I don't think that just having a degree is helping you in your chances to land a job. I'll take a few more questions. I wish I could answer. Perhaps I'll stay back after the talk and answer them on the platform itself. The next one is by Shriyan. If you're designing for a complex domain, is it a good idea to include how I went about building a domain expertise? Oh, absolutely. I think we tend to call it secondary research, right? Like us spending hours and hours to kind of absorb as much knowledge about the domain. That's a indication or signal you're sending that you're keen to learn more before actually jumping into your ideas and solution. So if you're able to document your key learnings as a part of the navigating that complex space, it's a really strong signal. Like it's showing that you are interested in going that extra step to uncover information. How to showcase confidential or unreleased projects of the industry? That's a good one. That's something I don't have a really strong answer on. What I've seen a lot of candidates do is put like a summary of that project in a public space. Like you've talk about that you're working in this domain, this is under an NDA, and you can't talk about it in a public format. So the signal you are sending is that there is work, it's just that you can't put it in a public format. And you can always say that you are comfortable talking about it in a one-on-one personal setup, which is fine. People respect that. I know a lot of portfolios have case studies hidden behind passwords. Perhaps that also works. Sometimes that also works. But again, when you're thinking of your top 2 projects, it's always good to have at least one which is out commercially, which is out in the public. Maybe not for students. For students, it's totally fine. But students in generally don't have the NDA issue also, so that's not a major concern. But it's if you have a portfolio of 4 projects all behind an NDA, the portfolio is not really helping the recruiter, right? Like, so essentially the signal you're sending is either talk to me or skip me. So have a mix. And if worse come worse situations, I think I've seen candidates create PDF portfolios and only share them around. So don't host it on a public domain. Keep it in a private setup and share that link around with the disclaimer, of course, that it's in the NDA. On which platform do you recommend building a portfolio on? I spoke about it. Any platform. Just the only caution is if you're building your own website, do it well. Don't screw that up because the risk of building your own website is that you can or you may end up sending a wrong signal. So don't screw that up.
So Manu, sorry to interrupt.
No.
Like you still have like 2 more minutes, so just scroll down so that you can have questions that are upvoted many more times. Like there are questions that have been upvoted like 19 times.
That's I'm so sorry. I had it sorted through time. My bad. I'll take the upvoted ones. How to show the vector of growth if just starting out? That's a good one. As a student, the easiest way to show it is to explicitly talk about your failures in your portfolios. Talk about what didn't work for you in that project. Be very candid. Talk about what actually worked for you. You can talk about things you learned working in a group in your portfolio. Like maybe you struggled with getting everyone in your group excited about the problem space. Maybe that's your struggle. Talk about that. Other way you can do it is show your transition from your first year projects to your final year projects, right? So, you have that story with you, like the first ever design that you made to your best project. It's there with you. Talk about that. Maybe write a blog about it and add that blog to your portfolio and push that blog on your home screen. That here's my journey as a designer. So it's highlighting those learnings, those mistakes. Which is signaling to who's consuming it that this person knows that they are growing. So it's assuring me that yes, they will grow when they join this organization as well, right? So send that signal upfront, send that signal visibly. Yeah, I think I'm on time. I will try to answer the remaining questions, maybe ad hoc, I don't know, but if not, I'm always approachable on social media. I have my DMs open, but thank you for bearing me out for an hour. I'm looking forward to Safina's session, which is next. So please do stay back. Over to you, Newman.
Okay, thank you so much, Manu. It has been really informative and even eye-opening in some way. Makes us think about our own portfolios in a different line now. Thank you so much. Also, the people who haven't got their answers, answered right now, there will be a panel discussion on February 6th, starting from 6 p.m. So, Manu, all the speakers will be there, and maybe you can pose these questions again, and we can have a discussion at that time also. So, please don't get disheartened. The time is a limit.
Yeah, I totally understand.
Yeah. So let's hope you can come over there as well. So thank
Absolutely.
you, Manu. We will be wrapping up this session, and we'll be taking a short break, and we'll be followed by Safina's session on career and research. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, guys. Hi, we're back. Um, so, our second speaker is Safina Ali. She has made her mark in the fields of design, education, and research. Safina has worked around design education and has gone into robotics. She's currently pursuing a PhD from MIT Media Lab in Cambridge. Safina will share her stories of career and research. So, I hand over the mic to Safina now.
Yeah. Just give us 2 more minutes. We'll be ending this session and starting the next one.